I've always journaled for my son, because I always felt that there was something different. So even as soon as he was born, I had journaled, and I was doing it because like he was finding himself in trouble a lot at school and things like that, and I just wanted to keep track of everything that was happening in his life. So when we met with professionals and doctors, I could explain to him exactly what was happening. And just one day, I decided to put it together. I was really only doing it for my own self-help. I really didn't think it was to get any bigger than that. It was just supposed to be for my own interest. And when I started to read back at it, I thought it was pretty good, and I thought there was a story to share with other people.
You're listening to the Behind the Village podcast. My guest today is Jackleen Givens, author of In His Lyrics.
So at the age of 15, he was identified with autism, which totally changed his life, and he had to learn how to navigate a new life that he didn't understand. So with that, it came with a lot of upset with him. So he really turned into a life of addictions, which turned to drug-induced psychosis. He was chronically homeless for 3 years in his life, from the ages of 14 to 17, about that age, he was homeless. So the memoir is really about my perspective as a mom, supporting my son through the difficult times, but it also bounces back to my son and what he experienced the time that he was homeless. So we had met in developing the book. So I really got his insight on what his true experiences were that I had no idea about.
Yeah, no, I think that's really lovely. And that's an important aspect to mention too, is that it's you and your son's efforts coming together to create this book. You know, it's not just one account or one side necessarily. It is your, from your perspective, but it's also with his input, which I think is really important.
And yeah. I think a lot of times families, they're not always comfortable sharing such stories. Like there's a lot of shame when it comes to mental health and addiction, psychosis. There's a lot of shame that comes with that. And I really wanted to shed a light to other families to start speaking up and share their narrative of what they're experiencing.
Absolutely. And I think, I'm a parent myself. My kids are much younger than your son, but, it's difficult as a parent sometimes when you're going through those challenges and like you said, trying to navigate it, and then the struggles that your child is going through. And I know the minuscule, in comparison, the challenges we've had, it's just, there's nothing worse than feeling like as a parent that you can't help your child, and
No. And the interesting thing is, I've worked in the field, the developmental sector field for, 35 years with the same company that I'm with right now. So I'm well aware of autism and mental health and different things like that. But when he was diagnosed, I really, heart of heart, I knew there was something going on with him, but I couldn't accept it. I had a hard time accepting it to be true. And I'm not sure if it was because I understood how it would be difficult for him to navigate his life moving forward and all the difficulties he would face. So it's kind of weird that working in the field and understanding this, that I had a tough time accepting it myself.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's almost two different things, when you're looking at it from a more, like you said, a work perspective, a knowledge perspective. It's different than all of a sudden facing it like firsthand.
It's an awkward position to be on the other side of the table, meeting with families, and now I'm the person that's on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how old was your son when you received the diagnosis?
He was 15. So quite that's older. And my question with the psychiatrist was how could this go undetected for so many years? Like, he was identified with a whole slew of different disabilities. And when we met with this psychiatrist, he said everything was wrong. And he was actually underneath the spectrum of autism, but it just didn't make sense. And the psychiatrist said it was because he has really strong communication skills. So he was able to mask a lot of things that were happening, but it really showed in his behaviors. So, the inability to express certain things, it really came out with some tough behaviors that we had to deal with.
Wow. And you mentioned, that he had been struggling with being unhoused from, early teen years as well. Was that
Uh-huh.
happening prior to the diagnosis, or did that happen after? Or
Well, he was starting to experiment a little bit with drugs, but not like how it went after the diagnosis. Yeah, he really did have a hard time following the rules and being part of our family. And it's not that we didn't want him at home. We truly love our son, but he would tell me that he felt that he didn't want me to see how he was living his life, and he just thought it was tough on the family. That I guess I'm having a hard time explaining this part.
yeah, it's tough to put into words in general, I think,
Yeah, he didn't
being
want
in
me to
that place.
witness what he was exposed to.
Mhm. I guess in terms of the diagnosis, and I know you've mentioned you've been in that field for a long time.
Mhm.
Did he express kind of how he felt after receiving it? Because I actually spoke to someone recently whose son had an autistic diagnosis later, and it kind of rocked. It was shocking for them to have that.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it was interesting because when we shared the diagnosis with him, like we had a hard time. We didn't know how we would tell him. Um, his response initially was just, he said to me he always knew he was different, but he didn't know it was this. He'd explain things like when he's in a group of friends, with a crowd, he always feels lonely, no matter how many people he's with, how many friends he's hanging out with, he always feels lonely. He always felt that he was different, but didn't know why. He would tell me, that he loves me, but he doesn't know how to express it. He would say that his mind felt broken. He just
Oh,
felt that he was different, but we never understood why.
wow.
So yeah, he did have a tough time navigating life. Once he found out the diagnosis, after it settled in, he became quite angry because
Yeah.
he felt that his life was a lie.
Wow. Yeah. I
Mhm.
can't even imagine like being told that after you've lived, a certain amount of time in
Right.
life, and that's just how you are and who you are, and then
Yeah.
being told that it's not typical, right?
Right. And we always thought that his behaviors were just an angry young teenager. I really didn't think it was autism. It all makes sense now looking back. So after we spoke with the psychiatrist, he wanted me to jot down any information that I would have remembered of him growing up, and reflecting back on my journals. It all makes sense now. But at the time, I just couldn't see it.
Wow. Yeah. I think it's hard sometimes when you're in it to take that step back to see, but obviously, like you said, looking back, then things start to make sense. Especially I think with mental health in general, I not that I'm in the industry, but I feel like it's difficult to really nail down a diagnosis because it's all so interconnected, and you're
Right.
not physically inside someone's brain, so it's very
Mhm.
difficult to nail any of that down. So
Right.
yeah. In terms of, because again, you are in that field, what kind of supports did you feel like you had supports, or did he feel he had some support through that, or?
Goodness, that's a great question. So we spent a lot of time supporting our son. We had him included with lots and lots of supports. But where we ran into difficulty was in Ontario. At the age of 12, you're your own consenting source for health. So anything after the age of 12, I couldn't force him into counseling or seeing a doctor. I couldn't get him to do that because he was his own consenting source. So that became a huge barrier. Another barrier that we found was that with our son, he could receive supports for mental health, but if he had any type of addiction, being dual diagnosed, they couldn't support that. So he had to be off all drugs and alcohol before he received mental health supports, but we didn't know how to do that. Like, the problem stemmed from mental health, and that's how he became addicted to drugs and alcohol. But there was no support for that. So when he was homeless, also, he would. He, it was important for him to find shelter, but then there wasn't shelter for youth, so he would be turned away. So there was nothing for him. He was on the streets. He couldn't go into shelters because he was too young. So yeah, we reached out to, and I labeled it all out in my book. Um, there was lots and lots of places that we had approached, but we were turned away. because he needed to be clean off drugs before he could receive any support.
Wow. It feels like the more I learn about mental health and what there is available, there's really some holes, some major gaps.
Huge holes. And it was around the time of the pandemic. So everything that he had supports for, he couldn't do it anymore. So everything was done virtually. And he wasn't comfortable doing anything virtually. He wanted to meet people in person. So that was taken away from him. That even included when he was on probation. So he wasn't able to meet with his probation officer anymore. And she was a huge influence with him. Like she was an amazing lady with great supports, but that fell through the cracks.
During that time, I know you mentioned there's struggles, but and I'm sure you lay it all out in your memoir, but from the parental perspective, what was that like?
It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. Because we worked so hard for our son, but we were just faced with barriers all the time, and there was nothing we could do. Like we spent years trying to get the right supports, but we were turned away because of either his age or because of the dual diagnosis. He'd been formed a number of times. We had him involved with a healing lodge. He was incarcerated. We were told from professionals, unless he was in jail, there was no way we could get supports for him, which is so strange. So there's a 16, 17-year-old boy that's in and out of jail, but we were told that was the only way he would receive supports. And that's actually how the diagnosis came to be, because with one of his court diversions, it was mandated that he have a proper diagnosis, and that's how we found out about it. So sadly, because he was incarcerated, it did help. It did help with some supports afterwards, but really, we didn't receive the supports that we needed.
Yeah,
just a diagnosis.
For me, it makes no sense that that's how far things have to go for action to be taken, and that's what's really frustrating.
It was very frustrating,
just from a normal person perspective, who's not in the field. So,
and it just seemed like we did so much for our son, and we exposed our boys to so many great adventures in life, but it almost seemed like he always sabotaged things, and that never made sense to us. But now, again, looking back, we knew it was from his he was uncomfortable being in large groups, loud noises, things like that, but we didn't recognize that at the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's something that's not new to us or to, humans, but it's something that there's more and more awareness being brought to the spectrum of autism in general now. So I think hopefully maybe more and more resources will become available for people in the future. I'm hoping.
I hope so. And with our son, it's kind of an anomaly because he doesn't present typical. So if somebody was to meet him, you wouldn't know. You would have no idea until you really dug deep and you saw some signs or whatever. But he really presents more as angry. And I think it's just the life that he thought he had. Wasn't the true life.
Yeah. And even the premise, right, of just feeling different. And like you mentioned, being in a group of people and feeling alone. Like you're just not connecting or, to people in a way that everyone else seems to be on the same wavelength. And to feel outside of that must really take a toll. It's just, it's heartbreaking. So, and then I guess tell me about the memoir and how that got started and what prompted you to write about this aspect of your life.
Right. So I've always journaled for my son because I always felt that there was something different. So even as soon as he was born, I had journaled, and I was doing it because he was finding himself in trouble a lot at school and things like that. And I just wanted to keep track of everything that was happening in his life. So when we met with professionals and doctors, I could explain to him exactly what was happening. So over the years, my goodness, I've got so many journals, books of documentation, court orders, a lot of different information. And just one day, I decided to put it together. I was really only doing it for my own self-help. I really didn't think it was to get any bigger than that. It was just supposed to be for my own interest. And when I started to read back it, I thought it was pretty good, and I thought there was a story to share with other people.
I think it's an important story too, and as you've mentioned, as when we've been chatting, it's an aspect that a lot of people aren't open about,
No.
and I think there's an expectation for parents to just know what they're doing, and there's so many things that happen in life where we don't, and it's important to share those stories because there are, I'm sure, tons of other people and other parents who may be going through something similar. And, maybe it kind of like raises a few flags and they're able to get the help they need, as
Right.
opposed to just struggling through with question marks. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree with that. Hmm.
And in terms of your son, how did he contribute to the book? Obviously, it's partly his life and you've journaled about it, but
Right.
did he contribute in any other way?
Yeah. So when I started creating the book, he did take an interest in it. And so we would meet on a regular basis and he would tell me stories of what happened to him when he was homeless. I had no idea what he had experienced. So it was incredibly upsetting to hear the stories that, what he had been through. So it's really outlined in the book, really descriptive of what he experienced. It's a dark read at points. So he contributed in sharing his story, but the title and his lyrics, that comes from a time when my son was incarcerated. The times that he was incarcerated or formed, he developed an interest in poetry and writing lyrics. So what I've done is he provided me his lyrics for certain songs, whatever he was experiencing at that time in his life. So I was able to take his lyrics and put it throughout the book. So whatever he was experiencing in chapter 4, that's what I had pulled from his lyrics. So, and that's how I came up with the title.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like it'll be, as you said, a darker read, but
Mm-hmm.
um, not that it's beautiful, but to have those lyrics and to have kind of what's been happening in his head and to be able to see that side of things too is going to be very interesting
And
to
he
connect
found
to.
that therapeutic. He found it therapeutic for writing lyrics and poetry, and he still continues with that today. Like he has done some traveling through Ontario, like Toronto and further south, to perform, which is crazy to think. A young man on the spectrum, and he's so nervous to be around crowds. He loves it. He loves to perform, and he's doing a great job with it.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And you share as much as you would like, but in terms of the journey of the book, you said it's quite dark. Is there maybe a happier ending, or you don't have to share? But
Yeah.
is
So it did wrap up pretty well in the book, I feel. So now he's a young dad. His baby's going to be turning 2 soon. I guess it's in March. He'll be 2. But so it ended up on a positive note. But since then, I'm considering writing a second book. So we'll see what takes me from there. But yeah, so his life really is a roller coaster. It's either really high or really low. I don't find much center medium with my son. So right now he's struggling. We'll see what happens in the next little while with him. But
wow, yeah,
yeah, we just
and
continue to support and love him.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
all we can do
Yeah.
sometimes, right? So, um, writing the memoir itself, what was that process like? At what point did you decide that this was going to be the medium that you were going to share the story through?
Right. The process, I found it very simple to, that sounds strange, but I did find it very easy to write the memoir. And I think it's because I had all the information. It was all in my head. I didn't have to create anything. Everything is factual. So I found that part easy. Um, where I found the difficulty is now, like with the publisher. Oh my goodness, it's so difficult to get it out there, to get recognized for all the hard work that I've done. And really, in creating the memoir, looking back, it's taken me 19 years to create. A lot of hard work in the last 3 years, like very dedicated and lots and lots of hours every day in creating it. But the process really did take about 19 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, of course it would. When you're pulling from, a more factual history, it's years of accumulated information,
Mhm.
So yeah, I just the scope to me just kind of blows my mind in terms of your willingness to share such a difficult time and the heaviness of the topic is I'm grateful that you are sharing, because I think this will
Thank
be
you.
very helpful for many people. And it's one of those things. I'm kind of at a loss for words, and I am looking forward to reading it and to reading your story, because I think it's, as we chatted about, aspects of parenting that people don't talk about, Then there were stories that you had no idea that aspects of your son's life that you had no clue, and you work in the industry. It's not like this is completely out of left field, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's not the life that I envisioned when we started our family. Not at all. Like, yeah.
Wow. In terms of the publishing of the book, what stage is that at right now?
So yesterday, finally, I pressed click, and it's sent off. So everything's been approved. So this week I'm just waiting to hear how long it's going to take. So everything's been formatted and approved. It's out for print right now.
Wow. And do you know how long that process takes, or is that just kind of up to the publisher?
Right. They're thinking it'll take 2 weeks to actually have it out. Right. So I'm waiting to hear from them this week for the next steps of where it'll be found. And
that'd be great, because having that information, knowing where we can purchase it, I'm sure there'll be an aspect of an online option, I'm sure.
Yes.
Whoever is holding it, I'm not sure, where to direct them quite yet, but we'll, once we know, that's something we can always add in after the fact too, and share that for those that are interested in purchasing, for sure.
That would be great. Yeah.
Is there, I don't know, is there anything else that you felt you wanted to share about the journey or about situation, or?
I'm not too sure. It's got me wanting to continue on with other projects. I have a couple other thoughts in mind. I'm wanting to continue on with this book. So there's going to be part 2 of what's happening. I'm also contemplating doing a children's book series on autism. So it would be more for children, to understand, why they may have difficulty with lights, with sounds, with smell. So different, kind of a different take on the spectrum, but I would hope to do it where it would support young children. Mm-hmm. So parents could read stories to them that's helping them understand what they're going through.
Yeah. I feel like they're not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be huge. Has writing this memoir and going through this process, has it helped in any way in terms of what you do work-wise and in the industry you work in? Is there a different perspective you're able to bring to it?
Right. I do feel, so I supervise group homes, and I do feel that I have a strong understanding of how families feel. So it's important for me to make sure that there's always open conversations with family members of the people I support for their loved ones. So I do feel that I have a little more understanding in that area, some compassion. So I really work hard with families to ensure that their children are supported the way that they should be.
Mm-hmm. Has there been any, not new necessarily, but is there an improvement in support now at all? Or are there any new programs that you've come across that maybe you didn't know then? Or?
Well, I think now there's support out there for youth that are homeless. So there are shelters for youth, but that wasn't the case when my son was going through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that support's there, but I really do think that there's a gap in the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to, looking forward, but not necessarily a positive way, of reading the book. And so I think, if there's nothing else that you want to add, then.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. I appreciate the opportunity for this. This is great.
Thank you for listening to the entire episode. All the links and info you heard in this conversation will be featured in the show notes on our website, villagermagazine.ca/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to our channels like YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you're listening from so you never miss an episode. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.